Imagine this. At a party, two men walk up to different women. They look the same, they dress the same, they stand in the same room. But something strange happens. One of them gets short replies, awkward smiles, and the conversation ends in seconds. The other? Women lean closer. They laugh. They want to keep talking. What's the difference? Just two simple words. Two words he says at the beginning of the conversation. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what those words are and the powerful psychology behind why they work so well. And once you understand this, the way you talk to people may change for... Let's understand this idea through a story. There was a man named Daniel. Daniel was 29 years old. He had a stable job, took care of himself, and most people would describe him as a normal and decent guy. Nothing about him was strange or unpleasant. In fact, many people thought he was friendly and polite. But Daniel had one problem that kept repeating in his life. Whenever he tried to start a conversation with a woman he liked, the interaction never went very far. The conversations felt short, awkward, and forgettable. Daniel usually started conversations in the most common way possible. He would say things like, "Hi, how is your evening going?" Or, "So, what kind of work do you do?" Sometimes he asked about hobbies or where someone was from. On paper, these questions seemed completely normal. The women usually answered politely. They smiled, gave short responses, and continued the conversation for a minute or two. But after that, the energy slowly disappeared. The conversation started feeling dry and mechanical. Eventually, the other person would say something like, "Nice talking to you," and then move on. This happened again and again. Daniel began to wonder what he was doing wrong. He believed he was following the right advice. Many articles online suggested asking questions and being polite. That was exactly what he was doing. One evening, Daniel shared his frustration with a close friend of his named Laura. Laura listened carefully and then gave him an honest answer that surprised him. She said, "Daniel, when you talk to people, it sometimes feels like you're interviewing them instead of connecting with them." Daniel didn't know how to respond at first, but after thinking about it, he realized she was right. His conversations were not natural exchanges between two people. They were more like a list of questions. He was so focused on saying the correct things that he forgot the real purpose of conversation, building a genuine human connection. That realization became the turning point that eventually changed how Daniel communicated with people. Understanding what really creates attraction. After that conversation with his friend, Daniel started thinking deeply about something he had never questioned before. What actually makes someone interesting to talk to? Most people assume attraction is mainly about physical appearance. If someone looks confident, dresses well, and has good style, they believe conversations will naturally work out. But psychology shows something different. Yes, appearance can help create the first moment of attention. It can make someone notice you across a room. But attention is not the same as connection. What keeps someone interested in a conversation has much more to do with emotional experience than physical appearance. In simple words, people remember how they felt around you. If a conversation feels tense, awkward, or forced, the other person's brain automatically connects that uncomfortable feeling with you. Even if you did nothing wrong, their mind quietly tells them that the interaction didn't feel enjoyable. But the opposite is also true. When a conversation feels relaxed, interesting, and natural, the brain forms a positive emotional memory. The person may not even remember every sentence that was said, but they remember the feeling of being comfortable and engaged. This happens because of something inside the brain called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are special brain cells that react to the emotional state of the person in front of us. They allow us to sense and reflect the feelings of others. When someone talks while feeling nervous, uncertain, or desperate for approval, those emotions are often picked up unconsciously by the other person. The listener may suddenly feel slightly uncomfortable without knowing why. But when someone speaks with calm curiosity and genuine interest, the brain responds differently. The other person begins to feel more relaxed, more open, and more willing to continue the conversation. This is one of the hidden reasons why some people seem naturally charismatic. They are not necessarily saying extraordinary things. Instead, they create an emotional environment where others feel comfortable being themselves. Daniel slowly realized that his conversations had always focused on asking the correct questions instead of creating a meaningful interaction. He was concentrating on what to say next, rather than paying attention to the person in front of him. Understanding this idea was the first step that helped him change the way he communicated with people. The human need to feel understood. As Daniel continued thinking about his past conversations, he began to notice a pattern. Most of the time, people were answering his questions, but they didn't seem emotionally involved in the conversation. The interaction stayed on the surface. That is when Daniel started learning about an important idea in psychology. Many psychologists believe that one of the deepest human needs is the desire to feel understood by others. One of the psychologists who talked about this idea the most was Carl Rogers. He spent many years studying how people connect with each other in therapy sessions and everyday life. Rogers discovered something very simple but powerful. People feel comfortable and emotionally open when they believe the person in front of them truly understands them, not judging them, not analyzing them, but simply seeing them for who they are. When this feeling appears, the entire tone of a conversation changes. Think about your own experiences. When you meet someone who really listens and seems to understand you, the conversation becomes easier. You naturally want to share more. You feel relaxed and interested in continuing the interaction. But when someone only asks questions without showing real curiosity or observation, the conversation can start feeling mechanical. It feels like filling out a form instead of having a meaningful discussion. Daniel realized that this was exactly what had been happening in his own conversations. He was asking questions, but he was not showing that he actually noticed anything about the other person. He wasn't reflecting what he observed about their personality, their mood, or their energy. In other words, the other person did not feel truly seen. Once Daniel understood this, he became curious about something else. If people want to feel understood, then maybe the key to better conversations is not asking more questions. Maybe the key is showing people that you are paying attention to who they are. And this is where a very small change in language can make a surprisingly big difference. It comes down to two simple words that can instantly shift the direction of a conversation. The two words that change conversations. After learning about the human need to feel understood, Daniel decided to try a different approach when talking to people. Instead of starting every conversation with a question, he experimented with a small change in the way he spoke. The change was very simple. It started with two words. You seem. At first, these words might not sound very special. They are simple and common words that people use every day. But in conversations, they can have a powerful psychological effect. The reason is that you seem immediately shows that you are observing the other person. It tells them that you are not just talking randomly or following a list of questions. You are actually paying attention to them. When someone hears the phrase, you seem, their mind naturally becomes curious. They start wondering what you noticed about them. This creates a small moment of interest that makes the conversation feel different from the typical small talk people experience every day. But the real power of these words appears when they are followed by a thoughtful observation. For example, instead of saying something like, "What do you do for work?" Daniel began saying things such as, "You seem like someone who enjoys learning new things," or "You seem like a person who likes trying unusual experiences." These kinds of statements are not direct compliments. They are gentle observations that invite the other person to respond. When someone hears a statement like that, they usually want to react. They might agree, disagree, or explain more about themselves. But either way, the conversation begins moving in a deeper direction. Research from Harvard University has shown that when people talk about themselves, certain reward areas of the brain become active. In simple terms, people often enjoy sharing their thoughts, experiences, and personal stories. By starting a sentence with, "You seem," Daniel was creating an opening where the other person felt comfortable sharing something about themselves. Instead of feeling like they were answering interview questions, they felt like someone had actually noticed them. This small change made conversations feel more natural and engaging, and Daniel quickly began to see a difference in how people responded to him. Why these words work psychologically. After Daniel began using the phrase, "You seem," he noticed something surprising. Conversations that used to end quickly were now lasting much longer. People were smiling more, sharing stories, and asking him questions back. At first, Daniel thought it was just luck, but when he looked closer, he realized that the phrase, "you seem," was creating 3 important psychological effects during a conversation. The first effect is attention. When someone says, "you seem," it shows that they have been observing you. In modern life, most people are distracted. They are checking their phones, thinking about work, or planning what they will say next. Because of this, people rarely feel like someone is truly paying attention to them. So when a person hears a sentence like, "you seem like someone who enjoys creative things," it signals that the speaker noticed something unique about them. That feeling of being noticed immediately makes the interaction feel more personal. The second effect is curiosity. "You seem" is not a strong claim. It is not saying something is absolutely true. Instead, it is a soft observation that invites the other person to respond. For example, if someone hears, "you seem like someone who enjoys traveling," their brain instantly becomes curious. They might think, "why does he think that?" Or, "is that really how I come across?" This curiosity makes them want to continue the conversation and explain more about themselves. The third effect is self-expression. Human beings naturally enjoy talking about their experiences, ideas, and personalities. When someone creates an opportunity for us to share those things, we often feel comfortable and engaged. Instead of answering simple questions with short replies, the person now has a chance to tell a story or describe something meaningful about themselves. This is why conversations that begin with thoughtful observations often feel deeper than ordinary small talk. The moment someone feels understood or noticed, the interaction becomes more memorable. For Daniel, this realization completely changed the way he approached conversations. Instead of focusing on asking the perfect question, he focused on noticing small details about people and reflecting those observations back to them. And that simple shift began creating stronger and more natural connections with others. How to use "you seem" the right way. Once Daniel understood how powerful these 2 words could be, he also realized something important. The phrase "you seem" only works when it is used in the right way. If someone uses it carelessly or in a fake way, people can sense it immediately. Conversations are very sensitive to authenticity. When words feel scripted or unnatural, the other person may lose interest instead of feeling connected. The first rule is to avoid making the observation about physical appearance. For example, saying something like, "you seem very beautiful," does not create the same effect. That type of comment is simply a compliment, and most people have heard it many times before. Instead, the observation should focus on personality, energy, or behavior. For example, Daniel started saying things like, "you seem like someone who enjoys discovering new places," or "you seem like a person who always has interesting stories to tell." Sometimes he would say, "you seem more adventurous than most people here." Statements like these feel more personal because they reflect something deeper than appearance. They suggest that the speaker noticed something about the person's character. The second rule is to keep the tone curious rather than confident. The phrase "you seem" works best when it feels like a gentle guess instead of a strong judgment. This gives the other person freedom to agree, disagree, or explain their perspective. For example, if someone replies, "actually, I'm not that adventurous," the conversation can naturally continue with a story or explanation. Either way, the discussion becomes more interesting. The third rule is to listen carefully after making the observation. Many people make the mistake of thinking about their next sentence while the other person is speaking. But real connection happens when someone feels that they are being fully heard. When Daniel began listening more attentively, people opened up more during conversations. They shared stories, experiences, and ideas that would never appear in ordinary small talk. By combining simple observations with genuine listening, Daniel slowly transformed the quality of his conversations, and people began responding to him very differently. Why feeling seen creates a strong bond. As Daniel kept practicing this new way of talking to people, he noticed something even more interesting. Conversations were not only lasting longer, but people also seemed to feel more comfortable around him. Some people started sharing personal stories within minutes. Others spoke with excitement, as if they were happy that someone had finally noticed something about them. This reaction is not random. Psychology explains why it happens. When someone feels understood or genuinely noticed, the brain releases a chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is often known as the bonding hormone because it plays a role in building trust and emotional connection between people. This same chemical is involved in close friendships, family relationships, and romantic connections. It helps people feel safe, relaxed, and open during social interactions. When someone says something thoughtful like, "You seem like someone who enjoys solving problems," it creates a small moment where the other person feels recognized. Even if the observation is simple, it signals that someone is paying attention to who they are. That moment of recognition can make the conversation feel more meaningful. Instead of feeling like another ordinary interaction, the discussion starts to feel personal. The other person may think, "This person actually noticed something about me." Because of this, they may become more willing to share their thoughts and experiences. Over time, Daniel realized that the most engaging people he met had something in common. They were not necessarily the loudest, the funniest, or the most confident individuals in the room. What made them stand out was their ability to notice others and reflect those observations in a thoughtful way. They made people feel interesting, and when someone feels interesting while talking to you, they usually want to keep the conversation going. Daniel understood that the secret was not about impressing people. It was about making them feel seen and understood during the interaction. This small difference can transform an ordinary conversation into something much more memorable. Final advice and what really matters. By this point, Daniel understood something that many people never realize about conversations. The goal is not to impress others with clever words or perfect questions. The real goal is to create a moment where the other person feels noticed and understood. The phrase, "you seem," became a simple tool that helped Daniel do exactly that. It reminded him to observe people carefully and speak about what he genuinely noticed. However, there is an important detail that should never be ignored. This approach only works when it comes from real curiosity. If someone uses these words like a memorized trick or a rehearsed line, people will usually sense that something feels artificial. Human communication is very sensitive to authenticity. Small signals in tone, facial expression, and body language reveal whether someone is truly interested or simply pretending. That is why the most important skill is not the phrase itself. The real skill is learning to pay attention to people. Notice how they speak, how they react to things, and what kind of energy they bring into a conversation. These small observations often reveal much more about someone than basic questions ever could. There is also another mistake to avoid. After making an observation, many people rush to say something else immediately. They become uncomfortable with silence and try to fill the space with more words. But silence can actually be helpful. It gives the other person time to think and respond. Often, this is the moment when people begin sharing something meaningful about themselves. Over time, Daniel realized that the most memorable conversations in life are rarely about impressive stories or perfect sentences. They are about moments where someone feels understood. Most people move through their day hoping that someone will notice them beyond the surface. When you become the person who genuinely notices others, your conversations naturally become more engaging and meaningful. So remember this simple idea. 2 small words can open the door to better conversations. You seem. But behind those words is a much bigger principle. Be curious about people. Pay attention to what makes them unique, and reflect what you notice in a sincere way. When you do that, conversations stop feeling forced, and real connections begin to form naturally. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who want to improve their conversations. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any videos about psychology, communication, and human behavior that actually change the way you see the world. And I want to hear from you. What's the most interesting "you seem" observation you could make about someone you know? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. Remember, real connection isn't about looking perfect or saying the right words. It's about noticing people, being curious, and making them feel truly seen. Start practicing today and watch your conversations completely transform. I'll see you in the next video.